Hello, magical experimenters. Welcome to tonight's video. And I thought what I would do is continue on the theme of the previous video that I shared earlier this week, where this time I'm going to talk about how to recognize and deal with perfectionism and lack of focus. And really, in a way, I kind of find that these sometimes they kind of go in opposite extremes. I mean, with perfectionism, you're so focused on trying to get it right that you're not really getting it done. And with lack of focus, you don't really have any focus at all. So let's deal with both of those because I think it's worthwhile. I'm just going to note too that this video and the previous one are going to also be uploaded to my How to Troubleshoot Your Magic course that I offer, because I think that these go hand in hand with the focus of that course. And I always like to make sure that people are able to, you know, learn whatever it is they need to learn in order to become better at what they're doing. So when we talk about perfectionism, I mean, let's really break perfectionism down. It's really kind of this notion that you have to have everything absolutely perfect. And this really doesn't help that in some ways we have this saying in the West, which is, practice makes perfect, which is the idea that, you do it long enough, it'll be perfect. I'm going to burst your bubble here and tell you that there is no such thing as perfection. If there was, perfection would be boring. Because, I mean, like if you were perfect, you'd never do anything wrong. That would be really boring. It would be a very boring life. Um, and this isn't to discourage you from doing magical work, but rather to recognize the difference between perfection and just doing it. A better saying that I like is, instead of trying to get it perfect, just get it done. Because when you're trying to get something perfect, you're never going to get it done. There's always going to be something that you're going to see that could be improved upon. Like, for example, with these videos, if I just stop every single time I stutter or say something wrong or whatever else, instead of just getting the video done, it's not helping you at all. It's certainly not helping me. Or if I stop because every single time, I spot a spelling error or something else, the same kind of thing with magic. Like when I do Sphere of Art, I don't, even though I have the chants memorized, I still sometimes get them wrong. And if I just stop and I let that get in my way, I'm not going to get it done. I mean, the fact of the matter is, like with magic and really with anything else, it's not about getting it perfect. It's about doing it. You'll get better at it as time goes on, and you'll recognize where there's room for improvement, and you'll work on it and you'll get better. But there's always going to be something you could improve upon, and that's not a bad thing. It just means that, if anything, you're doing it right because you're recognizing the level of improvement that you can have. The key thing too, with in regards to perfectionism, is that you need to recognize when you actually have done something well. Um, at my job, at my day job, we have this thing where we have these meetings, um, where we review calls, and we have what are called did wells and next times. And so we focus on the did wells. What did you do well? What worked out? And then you focus on the next times. What could you do better next time? And I think that's really a good mentality to take with anything. Like, take the time to recognize what you did well. For example, if you if you're working on a magical working each day, and you actually went and did it that day, you showed up, then that's a did well. If you committed to writing each day and you wrote one sentence for today, that's better than not writing anything at all. That's, recognize that. At the same time, I don't want. At the same time, I'm not saying, well, let's celebrate mediocrity either. Okay, I mean, there's no, participation trophies don't really mean squat, because at the end of the day, I mean, okay, you're there. But what it does mean, what it really boils down to is there's this fine line between recognizing the effort you're putting into something and getting too focused on perfectionism, or not necessarily pushing yourself as much as you could go. I talked in the last video about the 70% rule, and really the reason I'm bringing it up again is because it does apply to this whole thing of perfectionism. Because if you're going at it 100% or 150% or whatever, you're overextending yourself, and that doesn't help you at all. And that's the thing with perfectionism. Perfectionism is always about, like, okay, I'm gonna get it right. I'm gonna get it right, and there's not gonna be anything wrong. It's gonna be perfect. Like I said, there's always gonna be something that you could improve upon. Instead of focusing on that, focus on doing as best you can with it, and at the same time, be open to learning from the experience. And that's where that 70% comes into play, because you're focusing on 70% of your capacity. You're focused more on being present with the work. You're not focused on getting it right. You're focused on just doing it and being open to it and learning from it. And that is better than trying to get it 100% right. Because when you're focused so much on getting it right, you're not actually present with the work. And if you're not present with the work, then you're not doing it right anyway. Like when you get so focused on the execution and on the form of something, are you really present with it? And this is where I see, like, with perfectionism, people who get so caught up in perfectionism, they're always trying to get it right. They're always trying to get it right, but they're not actually listening and letting the experience speak to them and speak through them. They're not open to whatever's happening. And because they're not open to it, because they're not present, they miss out on the actual experience. They miss out on something fundamental. So my suggestion with perfectionism is just let it go. It doesn't need to be perfect. You just need to do it. You just need to do the work. And if you do the work, you'll learn from it. You will learn from it, and you will benefit from it, and it will speak to you and through you, and you'll get better at it. And as you do it more, you'll find that your 70% shifts, because what's going to happen is you'll get to a point where there's one component of the magical working that you're doing that you're going to know inside and out. And you'll be able to move on to that next component and integrate it into your work. And this is what I mean by this whole notion, really, too, in regards to perfectionism, that, like, it's not about getting it perfect. It's about doing it, and as you do it, you get better at it, and your 70% shifts, and as a result, you're able to do more. You're building up that stamina that I talked about in the last video. So that's what I want to say about perfectionism. And for any of you who are perfectionists in anything, not just magic, I would suggest that you really contemplate that. It's not about getting it perfect. It's about showing up and doing the work. So then let's talk about lack of focus, because lack of focus is kind of the opposite of perfectionism. It's where you're just scattered. Like, you're like, I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to go here, I want to go there, and you want to go everywhere. Lack of focus, I think this is a really good analogy for it. This one business coach that I worked with years ago, he said, if you have two different goals that you're trying to achieve at the same time, it's like trying to chase two rabbits. You can't chase both of them at the same time. You're not going to get anywhere. Because rabbit one goes this way and rabbit two goes that way. You're trying to chase both of them. You're not going to get anywhere. You've got to pick one or the other. And that's hard. I mean, we live in a society that glorifies multitasking. Never mind the fact that multitasking actually is not that good for you. I mean, it really does take a toll. And I say this as somebody who, spends all day at my day job multitasking. I'm handling phone calls, I'm answering questions in chat, I'm doing other things, and I can tell you by the end of the day I'm exhausted by it, because I'm having to switch. And in the midst of all that, I'm also working on my writing, but that in and of itself requires a certain level of focus. So it's one of those things where, like, you try to multitask, you're going to find that your ability to focus on any given task is going to decrease the more tasks you're trying to do. And that's where that lack of focus, I think, in part comes from, where we're told we have to multitask. We're told we have to focus on different things. Now, someone might say to me, "Well, Taylor, I mean, you're always working on different projects," and yes and no. But here's the truth of the matter. Like with any book that I'm writing, I'm just writing one book at a time. I'm not trying to write two books at a time. I'm not trying to work on 3 or 4 different projects at a time. It's one project at a time. It's the same thing when I'm creating classes. When I create a class, it's one class at a time. Because if I tried to focus on too many things at once, I'm not going to get anything done. And if people are like, "Oh, you're always so productive," well, the key to my productivity is that I get focused. I focus on what's important. Right now, as an example, I'm learning Qigong. Okay, I'm learning some different Qigong practices. And what I do is I have it set up where in the evening I do my standing practice first. And I do that for about a good 30 minutes to an hour. And then after that, I do God's Playing in the Cloud and Bagua. And I might change that order around a little bit. I'm not trying to do them all at the same time. I do standing practice, then I do God's Playing in the Cloud, and then I do Bagua. Or I do standing practice, and then Bagua, and then God's Playing in the cloud. And when I'm doing any of those practices, I am just focused on the practice at the time and doing it. I'm not trying to do them all at the same time. And you can apply this to your magical practice. Let's say that you want to do multiple things, like you want to do sigils, and you want to do tarot reading, and you want to do other things. Well, that's great, but just focus on one of those things and start learning it and doing it. And then as you get more comfortable with it, then, extend yourself a little bit. Again, remembering that 70% rule. So maybe you start learning a little bit about sigils. And again, people will say, well, Taylor, you talk about the fact that you're reading multiple books and all that out. Because it's like, if you were to look right now, like at the pile at my feet, you'd see, oh, he's got like 10 to 15 books. That's not demonstrating focus. Well, that's a little bit different there, first of all, folks. One, I think that way, where I have multiple streams of thought going on at the same time. I literally think that way. I have conditioned myself to think that way. I even have a mansion of memory set up that way. And also, the way that I work my research projects is I like to read multiple things and then consider all of them together and find ways to bring them together. So I'm still focused because it's always around whatever it is that I'm working on, and how can I bring all this together in order to accomplish this one thing. But it took me years to get to that way of thinking and doing things in regards to reading and my thought processes. And when it still comes down to magical working, is it's not like I'm splitting myself off and, oh, there's Taylor over here and Taylor over there and Taylor every little where. I'm not old Farmer McDonald, right? That one song. Instead, I am just focused on that one thing. Like if I'm doing sigils, that's what I'm doing. If I'm doing Qigong practices, that's what I'm doing. If I'm doing Sphere of Art, that's what I'm doing. And if I do integrate something in, I find a way to integrate it in because I already know the material. And I will use an example here. Lately with the Sphere of Art, when I'm doing the chants, I am actually doing my Qigong, part of my Qigong standing practice then. And part of that is because I'm running a bit of an experiment where I'm seeing how the integration of the Qigong standing practices interacts with the energies that I'm calling in with the Sphere of Art. I've been doing the Sphere of Art long enough that I can do that. And I'm getting more comfortable with the standing practice, where it's like, okay, I've got a feel for this, but even so, I'm doing it in a very specific context in a way, and I'm not trying to integrate everything in with the standing practice. I'm just integrating in what comes easily to me at this point and seeing how that fits into the sphere of art. So I mentioned that to you because, again, this is an example of by being focused where and at the same time, knowing something well enough where I can integrate it into something else and be able to do it, and still at the same time staying focused on what I'm doing. I'm not trying to do it all at once. So when you want to become focused at something, learn it to the point where you get more comfortable with it. And then when you've gotten to the point where you know it pretty well, then integrate other things in. You don't have to do everything at once. You're not going to get much done if you do everything at once. But if you master something over time and you get better at it, and then you integrate something else into it to that next level, or if you're like me and you take different systems of thought and practice and you blend them together in order to create something different, it still takes time and it still takes practice and dedication, and it's something that you'll get better at over time. And I say that, again, not to burst your bubble here. I know, like, especially when people are just starting out, they want to do all the things. I get it. And that's great. Nothing wrong with wanting to do all the things. But focus. When I first started practicing magic at 16, and I was reading, How to Work with Spirit Guides, I did each practice. I learned one practice and I did it again and again and again until I got it, and then I moved on to the next practice. That's actually how I read a lot of books with magic. Like, I'll read that book, I'll read partway through, and I'll do a practice, and then I'll go a little bit further, and I'll do a little bit more, and a little bit more, and a little bit more, and that's how you should read books of magic. Most people, they read books like they do everything else. That it's like they're trying to run a marathon. They just want to sprint through it. They just want to sprint through it as fast as possible. So they just read the book and they're like, well, now I should know everything. If you're really working a book of magic, you're gonna read that sucker 2 or 3 or 4 times before, and you're gonna learn something new each time. And the first time you might read it through and not do any of the exercises, which is okay. I recommend really read it and do the work, and just take your time with it. I mean, when I read a book on magic, it generally takes me, unless I've already read that book a few times, and even if I have read that book a few times, it generally takes me a good solid few weeks of just working through the stuff, reading through, trying the things. Even when I know a book pretty well, like I've read William G. Gray's modern or magic ritual methods probably about 10 times at this point, if not more. And I still take my time with that book. I'm not trying to get through it as fast as possible, and I would really advise the same to any of you. You want to get good at something, take your time with it. You have more time than you realize. People get so fixated on trying to get through stuff as quickly as possible, they don't stop and smell the roses. They don't take the time to enjoy their lives. They don't take the time to savor the experience. And I mean, yeah, we want to do magic to get results, but let's savor the experience of doing it in and of itself. Let the journey speak to and through you. It is worth it when you do that. It helps you to transform your life. It transforms your understanding of the work. And the truth of the matter is, if you just read through a book and you don't take your time with it, you haven't learned that much. You've learned a little bit of theory, but you haven't made it your own. When I talk about magical work and making it your own, I mean taking it and making it an experience that speaks to and through you, embodying it, making it part of your reality. When it becomes you, then you become it and you transform your life. It's as simple as that. All right, thanks for watching, and see you guys, and have a safe and happy holiday weekend if you're in the US, and just have a safe and happy weekend period wherever you are in the world. Much love to you all.